struggling with their fertility journey, and when they do get pregnant are fearful of, what could happen, or are they going to be able to get pregnant again? So that's awesome that you were able to share that. You also kind of talk about how other kind of areas of life that PCOS can kind of affect. So how does it affect childbirth? I know, you kind of talk about going the more naturopathic approach for conceiving. So is there a similar thing for childbirth, or what are the kind of ways it can affect it?
So I can have a slogan, I guess, for explaining birth is that my philosophy on birth, if you want to call it that, is there is no wrong way to give birth, just your way. And I think you can take that same philosophy and apply it to treatment plans with PCOS. There's no wrong way to treat your PCOS. It's just what works for you. Like for example, if you want to have an epidural for your delivery, you're not going to hire a home birth midwife. That just doesn't make sense. So if you want a natural approach to treating your PCOS, it gets to the root of the problem. Maybe mainstream medical approach is not the right fit for you. And I have found that people who are more on board with the NAPRO approach to using progesterone and supplementing progesterone during pregnancy, either are NAPRO technology OBGYNs, which sometimes don't actually do deliveries themselves. They just kind of manage your hormone levels as a co-care with whoever your provider is that you're going to be delivering with, whether it's at a hospital or birth center, OB or midwife. But the other option outside of NAPRO that tend to be on board with checking progesterone and managing progesterone levels tends to be midwives. I've run into a lot of pushback with other OBs with, oh no, we don't check that. We don't do that. And I used the NAPRO doctor to keep managing my progesterone, and also paired that with my midwives, and they were very on board with, sure, tell us more about it, and let's work together. So that may or may not be the case for you. You may have an OB that's super on board with looking at a NAPRO approach and like co-care and that kind of stuff, or some that are just like, yeah, no, we don't do that. So it really just depends on what your approach is. If you are wanting to be on birth control to manage your symptoms, go off birth control, see what happens. And, if PCOS is preventing you from conceiving, NAPRO is not your only option. If you want to use fertility meds, that's an option too. Like Clomid is a really common one. And, that's something that a traditional OB, that's the normal next step for most people. So it really just depends on what is your philosophy on how you want to treat your PCOS, and how does that trickle down into how you're going to plan your birth experience. So, with PCOS, that's not something that automatically makes you high risk. It's not something that you have to go, through maternal fetal medicine and all that kind of stuff. It's not. There are some other things that are going to vary person by person to see where the best place or type of birth would be for you. Weight gain is one of the symptoms for many people with PCOS. And if you do have higher weight, there are some other conditions that may be more common, but weight by itself does not make you high risk. And some doctors do treat it that way, unfortunately. So it's really finding the right care team for you. And, there's nothing about PCOS that means you're going to be automatically high risk or not be able to have the type of birth you want. But again, there's no wrong way to give birth. It's just how do you want to do it. So I found the NAPRO approach and a more natural approach to treatment of PCOS was the right fit for me. And for me in particular, that's also my philosophy with childbirth. And so midwives were a really great fit for me, and that worked well as a team together. That may not be the right fit for somebody else, but PCOS in and of itself is not something that has negatively impacted my pregnancies or my deliveries. But one thing that I teach in childbirth classes, either one-on-one or in a group, that I think applies really well to PCOS and kind of making the decision on, if you do get pregnant, who and what type of provider should you have, or maybe you think you might have PCOS, what type of doctor or a naturopath, or who do I go see, is using the acronym BRAIN. And BRAIN, the B is for benefits, R is for risks, A, alternatives, I, intuition, and N, nothing or not yet. So this is an acronym, BRAIN, that I use all the time in talking about childbirth, because there's so many things you have to make decisions about. So PCOS is another thing you can make decisions about. And it's basically looking at, what are all of my options? What are the benefits and risks of this option? If I'm not sure about it, what are my other options, my alternatives? Do I have checking in with yourself? Do I have a gut feeling? Is this the right fit for me or not? And then maybe what if I just wait and don't decide yet and come back to it? And you can apply that to any decision during pregnancy, any decision during childbirth, any decision in your entire life. It's like probably the most helpful tool that I've used. And I've used that with making plans about birth. And I've made that about figuring out what kind of doctor to see for my PCOS. And I've changed it over the years. And what worked at one stage of my life may change, and I may do something else for a different stage. And I think that's a really helpful way of looking at it. And I see a lot of parallels between choosing your birth plan care team and PCOS care team. And that's a good way to kind of help you figure out which way is the best option for you.
Awesome. And so is PCOS something that kind of develops on its own, or like you're born with it, or can it come like later on in life? So like, say, I know you said kind of most women find it when they're childbearing years, but so let's say someone had a child, can they develop it after having the first child for their second child? Or is that kind of like, if you had it for the first one, then you kind of carry that through your children?
Well, PCOS is not something that the exact cause is completely known. So we don't know for sure. It could be that you had PCOS but didn't know it yet. Because you can have PCOS and still get pregnant. You can still ovulate. It could be that you developed PCOS later on in life. It's possible to get pregnant and deliver one baby and then have secondary infertility for unexplained reason after that, which could be from PCOS or something else. There's so many variables. PCOS untreated tends to get worse over time. So it's also possible that it's just slowly gearing up and you're seeing the symptoms more later on.